what are the top policy actions that we as advocates should be asking of our governments to increase access to these health supporting NCD combating foods for all Caribbean people?
Okay. You mentioned the Port of Spain Declaration, which was, everybody knows, it's a landmark achievement for us in the Caribbean, and we led the world in 2007 in recognizing the importance of NCDs, and we call the rest of the world to action on these issues. And every year subsequent to the Port of Spain Declaration, at the heads of government meetings, mention is made of the declaration. And there is also a lament on the slow progress, particularly in the area of nutrition. And I think that one of the things we need to do is to recognize that, you know, governments spend billions of dollars every year in the treatment of these chronic diseases, but only a small fraction in dealing with the causes of these chronic diseases, which relate particularly to diets and food in general. So I think that we need to have a shift in our allocations and our recognition of the challenges, so that we do not spend these billions importing foods, and then we have to spend billions again in treating some of the causes of the imported foods, but focus more on the local production and understand why those things have been stymied to some extent in terms of local production of the foods, the plant foods that I mentioned earlier. One of the things that we have to do is really support the farmers. And when I say support the farmers, I am thinking of two dimensions. One is the technical aspect in terms of animal husbandry, in terms of appropriate irrigation, and looking at climate resilient cultivars, and all of those, the technical aspect of it. But and we do that because we have extension officers in almost every country that does some amount of that. We need to do more, because I know that farmers need that kind of assistance. The second part of helping the farmer is the one that I think we need to really strengthen. And that is the information. You know, we have to get away from teaching a man how to fish only. We now have to show him where to fish, and we have to give him the information to sell his fish. It's not just teaching him how to fish. So for example, we need to get the products. I mean, the farmers markets are good as far as they go, and you know that they exist in many countries in the Caribbean. But we have to think now about the information for marketing their products. And there are a few organizations out there, the ECTAD, that's based in St. Vincent by Jethro Green, is a good example of that, where they actually export dasheen and other crops to Europe every month, I think. That will not only bring good prices to the farmers, it will also show that this is a viable career structure, particularly for young people. And importantly, it will keep our local foods on our dinner tables, because it's not something that will vanish and disappear. So I think we need to help the farmers by the technical information and also with the information about marketing, which I think is important. We need more youth in agriculture. And I think that there is a case, a strong case to be made for it. It's just that we need to put some resources into it. And this is not just by government, private sector can do this as well. So this is one area I think that we need to really focus on. We need to help the farmer. We cannot allow our agriculture and our food systems to just disappear and be swamped by imports. The second thing we have to do is also to create what I call create a demand for the local foods. Now, how do we do that? Every Caribbean country has developed dietary guidelines, food-based dietary guidelines, almost every country in the Caribbean. And sad to say, most of those guidelines are collecting dust somewhere. And I think we need to dust it off, and we need to put those dietary guidelines to work. They're important documents. A lot of time and energy were spent on developing them to make them culturally available and culturally relevant. Each one has their individual icon, and a lot of process, a lot of qualitative studies had gone into it to develop them. And I think that this is another important link between food and health, because the dietary guidelines are developed. The book that we developed is strengthening those dietary guidelines, because it talks about which foods for which food groups, but the dietary guidelines, to my mind, is the base for it. And I think that this should be, there's a lot of training that can go on for both adults and children using those guidelines in different settings. And I think that that is one area. The other way of creating demand is to wake up a sleeping giant that we have in the Caribbean. And that giant is the Caribbean Home Economics Association members. I say this with no apology, because it's going to, our local foods are going to disappear if we don't have the meals, the delicious meals at a affordable cost that people can have it sustained. Every country in the Caribbean has a chapter of the home economics. These are teachers, trained teachers. They know how to prepare the local foods. We need to get it now to the manufacturers so that they can sell and market those local foods, rather than sitting back and having these ready-to-eat foods that come as breakfast meals and dinner meals and microwave meals and so on and so on. Yes, our teachers in the association, they train our students to pass the CXC exams, and that's great. But I think we can utilize them more, and I'm hoping that we can use their talents. They have enormous talents of using our local foods to make them delicious, much more delicious than some of the stuff that we find very convenient and sometimes even cheaper. So I hope we can wake up that sleeping giant. The third area I would want to emphasize is in the whole reformulation process. And I think here is where regulations might come in, so that we can regulate the or limit the amount of trans fat. We can limit the amount of saturated fat, sodium, and sugars in our food system, either by selling, particularly in schools when they reopen. I think this is a way to go. We haven't really done enough. We're backing away from it, but I don't think we should, because I think that this is a very important area to ensure that our local foods are part of the reformulated foods that are delicious and can remain as part of our cuisine. The labeling is another part of the marketing, and I think we should continue to push with the labeling, because I see this as part of the process of reformulation. We run into headwinds when we think of labeling, whether it's front of package labeling or whatever, as a standalone. I don't see it as a standalone. I see it as a part of the reformulation package. And it is an integral part of the reformulation package, because it is an attempt to have healthy foods consumed, and there is no better than the local foods that we have, as exemplified beautifully in the book that you all will buy. So Charity, I'm really proud of the book. Let me just say quickly that it looks at all 6 food groups, and it shows the top 10 foods that are ranked in terms of their contribution to controlling chronic disease, and their summaries. So if you are, whatever condition you have, you can quickly look at the summary and you can choose whichever foods you want. Last thing is that doesn't mean that these 60 foods are the only foods out there. It's just plant-based foods we focus on. So this is the top 10, but you know, almost any vegetable can be consumed, okay? But we're just showing you which ones have, I mean, little is known that, for example, guava has several times higher vitamin C than oranges. We think oranges is the gold standard for vitamin. One guava has many, many more times vitamin C than an orange. So oranges are good, but guavas are better if you're looking for an antioxidant like vitamin C. That's the kind of thing we bring out in the book. So those are the key things that I would want to push to get local foods more in our cuisine, and so it doesn't disappear, Charity.